Hello again. I'm delighted to have as my guest Carolyn Raphael, and we're going to be talking to her. She is a poet and a really excellent one, and I think she does some very special things, and I'm so delighted that she could join us. I'm really so pleased that you're here.
Thank you, Sheila.
You know, I was reading through your new book, which is really excellent.
Thank you.
Just excellent. I love the poems. I said to, Carolyn asked me if I would select the poems, and I said, no, I think I would really be pleased if you did it. And as it turns out, she's doing things that I think I would have selected. So there we are, we're on the same page.
Good.
I also want to mention, and we'll get to it, that Carolyn is really a, what can I call her? Not a pioneer, but she is really an adamant artist who wants to bring poetry into this community. And to that end, she sponsors a poetry contest every year. And as a matter of fact, the award ceremony is coming up this Sunday. But it's really wonderful. I mean, it's posted around the village, it's in the press. So poetry is really very present in our community, thanks to you.
Thank you.
I really mean it.
And Mayor Gene Cylinder, who sponsors it.
But let me just ask you, I know that you taught at Queensborough Community College. You taught English, I would guess. But when did the poetry bug bite you? When did you decide to write poetry?
Well, I wrote poetry from the time I was about 11, but it was my second career because I taught for 30-some-odd years at Queensborough, and then at which time I wrote textbooks and I taught. But after I retired, that was when I had time for me to do the publishing of the work that I'd been doing for so many years. And I've been doing that for the last, I've been writing for publication for about 25 years, and now it's fun because it's my time.
Well, something that you do that I think is very interesting, and you indicated in your book, Dancing with Bare Feet. So you're going to have to tell us about that.
Sure.
But something that you do is that you adhere to real poetic forms. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that comes from your teaching background.
It does.
But each of the things that you write, you know, if one is a sonnet and one is something else and something else, you make it very clear. And as I read them, I found myself wondering, do you, well, what is it that gets your creative juices going? Do you initially have a sense of, I want to write a sonnet or I want to do this? How does that work? Which comes first?
No, that's an
the chicken or the egg?
It's an interesting question. Sometimes the form seizes you, and you're starting to write and you say, oh yes, this has got to be 14 lines, it's not a long poem, and I'd like to do it in rhyme. And by the way, I write in free verse as well.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not, you know, a strict adherent.
No, I see that.
But sometimes you start wrong, well, maybe not wrong, but you start with a form that won't work, and you have to be courageous enough to say, oh, that will not do, and try. Sometimes you try rhyme, nope, rhyme doesn't work, maybe I'll try it in blank verse, which is unrhymed iambic pentameter. Or maybe I'll write it in free verse, I have to just break out. So you have to listen to the dictates of the art and let it tell you what to do.
Would you characterize what you write? I mean, is there some sense of, I can't say a mission statement, but is there some subject or some thing that you really, that kind of takes you in that direction?
Well, there are many passions.
Yeah.
One, of course, is music. I went to the High School of Music and Art, not to be a musician, but because I had to be around it a lot.
Yeah.
And I played the cello, not terribly well, and I've been an adherent of the arts and of music in particular all my life. My husband fortunately loves it as much as I do, so we go to the opera and to chamber music concerts and to the symphony. And I write poems about music, also about art. We've been fortunate enough to go to Italy for many years, and so we're in love with the Renaissance and with things Italian.
And why not?
Why not? Absolutely. And besides that, I write about family.
Yeah.
That's always fun, especially since my family is growing, and that's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Music, art, family. I also like to be taken by newspaper article. I have one poem that I'm
Okay.
going to read that just got my attention because
Yeah.
it was such an interesting article.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have to be open. Sometimes a piece of a conversation.
Yeah.
I'll hear something on the subway or on the street and say, oh,
Yeah.
I got to run with that.
Yeah.
So,
So
you know,
your antenna is up a good
I
deal of the time.
every writer's antenna is up.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, you know, I'm a great believer in every person really having a reservoir. Everything that happens to us goes into it.
Quite true.
I think artists are perhaps closer to summoning that up, but everybody's got it. You know,
You just have to tap into it.
It's recorded somewhere. I really believe that.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
What, you know, is it, you've kind of touched on it, but what is it that actually gets you sitting down and with, I don't know how you do it. Do you do it on the computer? Do you
Yes, it's
write
very
freehand?
unromantic. I know people who don't quite use quills, but they use dipped in ink
Yes,
pens
yes,
and
yes,
fancy
I can
special
believe it.
implements, and I like to write at the computer because I can change it so fast.
Yeah.
And my handwriting is slow,
Yeah.
and I want to work fast
Yeah.
so I can put down 3 alternative ideas
Yeah.
to one, and I do that best on the
Yeah.
computer. Unromantic though it may be.
Yeah, yeah.
I like to work on the computer.
Listen, do you want to tell us a little bit about the competition, about the poetry contest
I would love
that you
to.
do?
On Sunday at 2 o'clock in the Great Neck Plaza Village Hall, we will have the winners of this, our 6th annual Great Neck Plaza Poetry Contest.
Okay, here's a
Here it
flyer
is.
on it if you need it.
No, this is lovely. And we will have the prize winners, of course, reading.
Yeah.
And then we will have time for some opens because people like to come and listen to poetry and read a poem of
Yeah.
their own. And it's always a lot of fun because the people who win the prizes get a chance to read a little bit more than their own poems. So the first prize winner will read his poem, George Northrop, and several others, and so will the second and third.
Yeah.
So we get a feeling not only for the single isolated poem, but for some of the work of the person who wrote it. I like that.
Do you select the poems, or
Oh,
do
no.
you have a jury?
We have a judge. And
Yes.
the judge this year is George Held, who is a distinguished professor from Queens College, has written a great deal, and he will be reading some of his work as
Yeah.
well as introducing the people
Yeah.
who won. So, and it's a totally anonymous
Yeah.
kind of thing. Nobody knows the names. In fact, when the judge sends me the winning poems, they're all numbers.
Yes, do you want to tell us who the winners are this
Oh,
year?
I would love to. First prize is George Northrop for a poem called Thomas Hobbes' Poet. Second prize is Joan Higuchi for Haute Couture. Third prize is Sybil Bank for The Past Life by Objects. And 2 honorable mentions, George Northrop again for Time Travel, and Annie Karpenstein for Recycled.
Lovely. Sybil is going to be a guest a little later
Yes, I
in this
know.
program.
She's a lovely poet.
Yes.
She is.
Well, you know, I think, you know, because I do a lot of poetry in my programs that I read, I think poetry is absolutely the best.
Oh, so do I.
And I think opening people up to it is just the best way to get people to understand how terrific it really is, because it does something so special. It really gets to the essence of so many things that we care about. Feelings, thoughts, ambition, all of those things. The poet is the person who captures it in a very special way.
And it's wonderful
I'm,
to have a champion like you, Shirley. I really do appreciate
no,
it. No, I do.
I just love it. I really do.
I'm delighted.
So we have that great thing in common. And I think that you keep doing it is just really wonderful.
It's a hard habit to break.
Yeah, yeah. Now I know that you've been doing readings. You're going to do them. You can tell us about them. But give me a sense of the feedback of how you feel and what kind of response you get from your audience.
I had an interesting reading last week in Yonkers at the Yonkers Public Library with the Rivertown String Quartet. And they played a beautiful Beethoven quartet, a long one, and they stopped between movements and had me read poetry.
Oh,
and
what a great
Isn't that
idea.
fun? And the poetry was based on music and on poetry. So it was Poetry for Poetry Month and music because it was a concert. So it was
Lovely.
a nice integration.
Lovely.
Of
Lovely.
music, art,
and
and
did you
poetry.
get some kind of feedback from your audience?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, people came up and said things like, well, I don't usually do this, but you were sitting in the lobby of the library, and I was going to the library. So I thought I'd just stop and listen. That's the best way, you know, to do it that way.
Okay. Well, listen, I think we've been talking and
Sure.
talking and talking about your poetry. I think it's time to hear some. I would
Good.
just love to.
Good.
So, Dancing with Bare Feet. Is that one? That's one of the poems.
Yes, that is one of the poems. I'll be glad to read it to you.
Oh, why
and
don't you?
let's see where
Tell
it
us
is.
what you're doing, and do tell us the form. I think that's so interesting that you, as a poet, adhere to the various forms
Yes,
of
as
poetry. That's not always the case.
isn't that funny? I can't find it. I'll find it. At any rate, let me start with a different one and work to that one.
Okay.
I was telling you before about a poem that I really enjoyed called A Night at the Opera.
Okay.
My husband and I are very serious opera lovers. But many years ago at the Metropolitan Opera, they didn't have any super titles, so you had to listen to the opera in the original language. And Wagner's Die Walküre is 5.5 hours long. The second act alone is an hour and 40 minutes. And after sitting through it a few times over the years, I really decided I couldn't take the second act anymore, not knowing what they were saying. So I told my husband I was going to leave for the intermission in the second act, and he thought I was kidding. But I did leave, and it became quite an adventure. So I thought I would read A Night at the Opera for you.
Okay.
And by the way, it's in a form of 6-line stanzas called sestets. And it's got a rhyme scheme that Shakespeare used in his Venus and Adonis poems. So you can hear some of those rhymes very gently. It's fun. So this is A Night at the Opera, Die Walküre at the Met. And I dedicated it to my husband. Wagner remains the pinnacle for him, especially the saga called The Ring. 4 operas, 15 hours. Some would trim protracted dialogues, a wish to bring this marathon more swiftly to a close. A blasphemy as any Wagnerite knows. I must admit that now I am a fan. It wasn't always so. There was a time Walküre's second act seemed duller than a 5th declension Latin paradigm. For 90 minutes, nothing moved but air. I wished I could be anywhere but there. Today, the English titles kindly beam the dialogue and let the listener in. One night, I realized a daring scheme, an escapade I could bequeath to kin. Before the second act, I disappear, returning for the third, a mutineer. I trembled as the first act curtain fell, waved to my husband, ran across the street to buy a movie ticket. I was well into the first half hour before my feet permitted me to watch the screen. Sorry. And while the plot was sad, I couldn't curb my smile. After, because I had some extra time, an ice cream soda. Then I made a call to tell my children of their mother's crime. Claiming my vacant seat was best of all. Movie, I said, and struck a victor's pose. Of course, he muttered, as the curtain rose. So that was really a crime.
Good for you.
A crime. It was fun to do. I enjoyed it. Anyway, we also love art, and we were in Berlin one year when they were just moving the statue of Nefertiti. And I've always been in love with that statue, not only because it's beautiful, but because one of her eyes is unfinished, and I always wanted to know about that.
Okay.
At any rate,
Let's hear it.
well, let me tell you that this is a dramatic monologue.
Okay.
And, you know, like Browning's My Last Duchess. And it's not terribly in vogue today, but some of us who really love to speak in other people's voices enjoy writing
Yeah. Okay,
dramatic
let's hear it.
monologues. So this is Nefertiti's Eye. Now, Nefertiti was found by James Simon, who was a wealthy German merchant who found it in Amarna, Egypt in 1912. So I am imagining that it's in his house, which it was. He kept it there till he donated it. And he's having a dinner party, and it's right on his mantle, Nefertiti in his own house. So this is James Simon talking about Nefertiti's eye. Look at her neck, my friends, a slender stem of lotus. Note how the tall blue headdress flares above her noble profile. Come in closer, where we can gaze into that storied face. Eternal majesty, aloof, serene. Observe the golden band that sets off arched black eyebrows, kohl-lined eyes. Yes, Carl, the left eye is unfinished. Once this troubled me. Some say the sculptor fell in love with her and couldn't bear to leave a perfect likeness. I doubt the story, but I understand. Admire her necklace, collar wide, its rich design. Forgive me, I've just been told in 5 more minutes dinner will be served. Say your goodbyes to Akhenaten's queen. I too must bid farewell. Next week she leaves my home to rule in the museum, where all may see those full red lips that still command. Though I donated treasures in the past, my bronzes, paintings, even my Mantegna, she is by far the hardest to renounce. Then I shall stand before her with the rest, attempting not to bend my knee in homage. But unlike any other, I'll recall the days and nights I knew that she was mine.
Oh, very nice.
Now, you were talking about form. This is in unrhymed iambic pentameter because rhyme would just have been too much. It was a story, and I wanted it to sound conversational, so it's unrhymed. Okay, let me show you that I also write in free verse. I told you about this newspaper article before. It was about a dermatologist who felt that he had to warn people of the dangers of sun poisoning and of excess sun exposure. So he put on his white coat, lab coat, and went out on weekends on his own time to beaches on Long Island giving out sunscreen. Now that was interesting enough, but what I really loved was that he went to a nude beach. What could be funnier, right? So this is Skin Doctor on a nude beach. No one wants him here, the white-coated angel of melanoma. How foolish he looks in his long pants, shoes, and hat, of course, offering sunscreen wrapped in gilt. He moves deliberately from towel to blanket to chair, asks questions in a diplomatic voice, invading our Eden, inviting us to know.
Oh, I like it very much. I think we have time for another or two.
One more or two?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me read a sonnet since I love to write sonnets. There's a word in Italian called sprezzatura, and that was defined as early as 1528 by Castiglione in his Book of the Courtier. And courtiers had to be very talented. They had to know how to ride and how to dance and how to write poetry, play music, but they had to make it look easy. What the kids say today is don't let them see you sweat.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really what sprezzatura is. And his definition was to practice in all things a certain nonchalance which conceals all artistry and makes whatever one says or does seem uncontrived and effortless. And it's just a 14-line sonnet. Sprezzatura. DiMaggio had it, so did Fred Astaire. The dazzle of a sweet swing, the appealing insouciance of a dancer on the ceiling, the absent strain, the unassuming flair. Since what we saw seemed natural as air, the artistry that disallows revealing bewitched us as we reveled in the feeling that we could do it too, if we were there. But elegance has shriveled into cool, the fashion model pouting into space, disdainful glances from the clique at school. And accolades for apathy erase the reverence for skill that was the rule, while we sweep up the vestiges of grace.
Oh, that's lovely.
Thank you.
Well, we love the sonnet because we love Shakespeare.
Right,
And he really just did it like silk off a spool.
Indeed.
Thank you so much,
You're so
Carol.
welcome.
This
It
has
was
really
fun.
been wonderful, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Thank you.
And just keep it up.
We shall.
You're really doing a great thing.
I appreciate it.
And thank you again.
Thank you.